It's 6:47 on a Monday morning, and somewhere in Parramatta, an alarm goes off, and a 49-year-old rolls over, groans, and starts getting ready for a job he's been doing for 26 years. He's not doing it because he loves it. He's doing it because he has to. And if you asked him 10 years ago whether he'd still be doing this at 49, he would have laughed and said, "No way, I'll be done by then." Well, here we are. And today, I want to answer the question that alarm clock guy wishes someone had answered for him properly 2 decades ago. How much money do you actually need invested to never work again before you turn 50? And I promise you, the number is smaller than most people assume. Here's the reframe most Australians get wrong. Early retirement isn't an income problem. It's a math problem. You don't need to earn $300,000 a year. You don't need to inherit a house. You don't need a lucky crypto trade or a wealthy uncle. You need to understand one simple formula and then apply it with more consistency than the person next to you. That's it. That's the entire game. And once you actually see the formula laid out, you'll realize most of what stopped you so far wasn't a lack of money. It was a lack of clarity. Let's start with the framework because everything else builds on this. It's called the safe withdrawal rate, and the most common version of it is the 4% rule. The idea is simple. If you've built up a portfolio and you only withdraw 4% of it each year, historically, your money should last 30-plus years without running out, because your investments keep growing even while you're pulling money out. This rule came out of research into decades of US and global market returns. And while no rule is perfect and markets don't move in a straight line, it remains the most widely used starting point for figuring out how much is actually enough. Flip that math around and you get your target number. Just take the annual income you want and divide it by 4%, or multiply by 25. And that's roughly what you need sitting in your portfolio before you can walk away from work for good. It's the single most useful equation in this entire video. So if you remember nothing else, remember that one. So let's run the actual numbers across a few different lifestyle tiers, because not everyone wants the same version of freedom. If you want a lean lifestyle, around $40,000 a year, covering rent or a paid-off place, groceries, and the basics, without much room for extras, you'd need roughly $1 million invested. If you want a genuinely comfortable lifestyle, say $65,000 a year, which covers a nicer place, regular outings, the odd holiday, and no real financial stress, you're looking at around $1,625,000. And if you want the full version of freedom, the one with overseas trips, a good car, and not thinking twice about a dinner bill, you're talking $100,000 a year in income, which means a target of around $2.5 million. And if you're the type who wants a genuinely luxurious exit, private health cover, no compromises, maybe even helping the kids out along the way, you could be looking at $150,000 a year, which pushes the number up toward $3,750,000. Now, before you close this video, because those numbers look enormous, stay with me, because the next part is where this actually becomes achievable. And it's the part most finance content skips over. They show you the scary total and then cut to a sponsor read without ever explaining how an ordinary person actually closes that gap. The number that actually determines whether you retire at 45 or 65 isn't your salary, it's your savings rate. Someone earning $90,000 who saves 10% of their income will take dramatically longer to reach financial independence than someone earning $70,000 who saves 40%. Because the gap between what you earn and what you spend is the fuel for the entire machine. Income determines how big your engine could be, but savings rate determines whether it actually moves. Let's say you're aiming for that comfortable tier, around $1,625,000, and you're investing into a diversified portfolio averaging a reasonable long-term return. If you invest $1,000 a month, you're looking at roughly 28 to 30 years to get there, which barely moves the needle if you started at 30. But if you push that to $2,500 a month, the timeline drops to somewhere around 20 years. And if you can find a way to invest $4,000 a month, whether that's through a higher income, cutting expenses aggressively, or both, you can realistically be looking at 14 to 15 years, which is how someone who starts seriously investing at 33 ends up financially free before 48. And here's the thing. That number jump from $1,000 to $4,000 a month sounds impossible until you realize most people spend that difference already. They just spend it on a car upgrade, a bigger apartment, and a holiday they finance instead of save for. This is the part where the psychology matters more than the spreadsheet, because on paper, everyone agrees they'd rather retire at 47 than 65. But in practice, most people never get there. And it's not because they can't, it's because of lifestyle inflation. Every time their income goes up, their spending quietly follows it. The salary increases, the car gets upgraded. The income increases again, the apartment gets bigger. And the gap between income and spending, the exact thing that was supposed to fund their freedom, never actually widens. People don't fail at early retirement because they didn't earn enough. They fail because they never let the gap grow. And the frustrating part is this happens quietly. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to sabotage their own freedom. It happens one subscription, one upgrade, one impulse purchase at a time until a decade's gone and the portfolio looks exactly the way it did 5 years ago. There are really only 3 levers that control how fast you get to your number. Your savings rate, how much of your income actually gets invested, your return rate, what your money earns while it's invested, and your starting point, how early you begin. And here's the uncomfortable truth about those 3 levers. You have almost no control over the market's return in any given year. And starting earlier only helps if you're reading this in your 20s, which most of you aren't, which means the only lever you actually control right now, today, is your savings rate. That's the dial you can turn this month. Not in some hypothetical future, not after the next pay rise, not once the mortgage feels more comfortable. Today. And this is where it gets interesting, because small increases compound in ways people don't expect. If you're currently investing $1,500 a month and you find a way to bump that to $2,000, you're not just adding 33% more money, you're potentially cutting years off your entire timeline, because that extra contribution is compounding for longer alongside everything else that's already growing. Even a seemingly small $200 or $300 a month increase sustained over 15 years can be the difference between retiring at 51 and retiring at 47. The maths rewards consistency far more than it rewards intensity. One more thing worth knowing. Superannuation plays into this differently than a lot of people assume, because your super is already working toward a version of financial independence. It's just locked away until preservation age, which means if your goal is genuinely to stop working before 50, you likely need a second pool of investments outside super that you can actually access in your 40s, while super keeps compounding quietly in the background for the decades after that. A lot of people building toward early retirement in Australia end up running exactly this kind of dual-track approach, maxing out concessional super contributions for the long-term tax advantages, while simultaneously building a separate accessible portfolio to bridge the years between walking away from work and actually being able to touch their super. It's also worth being honest about the risks nobody likes to mention. Retiring early means a longer stretch of time for your portfolio to weather market downturns. Sequence of returns risk is real, which is why most people pursuing this don't retire the exact day they hit their number. They build in a buffer. They stay flexible about spending in a rough year. And some keep a small side income going, not because they need to, but because it protects the whole plan from a bad 5-year stretch right at the start. So let's bring this back to the alarm clock at 6:47 on a Monday morning. The difference between that version of 49 and a version where you've already walked away isn't luck, and it isn't income. It's the gap between what you earned and what you kept every single year for 2 decades. The people who actually pull this off aren't the highest earners in the room. They're the ones who decided early that the gap mattered more than the lifestyle. They drove the older car a little longer. They said no to the upgrade that everyone around them said yes to, and they never once mistook someone else's spending for someone else's wealth. So here's the real takeaway. Pick your number based on the lifestyle you actually want, not the one you're performing for other people. Work backwards from that number using the 4% rule, and then attack the one lever you actually control, which is your savings rate. It's not exciting, it's not going to trend anywhere,
But it is genuinely how ordinary Australians on ordinary salaries end up walking away from work before 50, while everyone else is still setting an alarm.
If this got you thinking differently about your own number, do me a favor and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.